Why, hello there. This is DJ Gallup of Courageous Consciousness. And last night I was hanging out with my brother-in-law and we were watching this documentary. I think it's fairly recent. It was a HBO documentary called The Inventor, Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. And I don't know if you guys have heard of this documentary or not, but it was a really interesting story. And maybe you've heard a little bit about it, or maybe you've heard absolutely nothing about it. But I kind of thought that it lent itself to like a law of attraction case review, if you will. And so I kind of thought that this might be something that would be fun to do on this channel here and there, is take something that's going on in the world with some inventor or some famous person, and then kind of break down why law of attraction worked for them or didn't work for them. And in this case, it's going to be kind of interesting. So let me lay out the backstory for you guys in case if you have never heard of this documentary or the story behind it. So there's this woman. She's named, her name is Elizabeth Holmes. And she, of course, was, a brilliant young woman, always had done very well academically. And so she gets accepted into Stanford University, and almost as soon as she gets to Stanford, she has these big ideas for starting some sort of business that will change the world. And so she has these ideas, and when she's just 19 years old, she comes up with this idea of, what if we could create a blood testing system, something, normally we have to take blood samples, from the doctor or from the phlebotomist, and we have to send them to a lab, and it could take days or maybe weeks to get the results back, and it's very expensive and it's very time consuming. What if we could put all of those tests inside a box, roughly about the size of maybe a laser printer, and we would have one of these boxes in certainly every drugstore across the country, and maybe if the price could be brought down enough, maybe one of these boxes could be in everybody's home. So you could basically get blood testing anytime, anywhere. And the idea she had was that she would start this company called Theranos, and the name of these boxes would be called Edison boxes. And the concept was that this would completely disrupt the current system of blood testing in America. And so she started this company, and she was able to raise a ton of money from private investors. And, she was, of course, located out in Silicon Valley. And she was doing really, really well for a while. Like, she was kind of considered to be like one of the new Steve Jobses of her time. And it was really exciting that this, young woman just at the ages of 19, 20, 21 was doing all of this work to create this like awesome new product. And for a while, everything seemed to be, really going uphill for her. And, maybe a few years into the project, Theranos, the company, was valued at $9 billion. Her company that she started as a 19-year-old Stanford dropout, just a couple years later, was valued at $9 billion. And at one point, she was actually considered to be America's youngest self-made billionaire of all time. Like, she herself was considered to be worth well over $1 billion. And needless to say, because we're talking about it here, and there's a whole documentary made about it, obviously, it didn't work. And basically, these Edison systems, these Edison boxes, they could just never get them to work. There were lots of problems, and the company did a lot of really shitty things along the way, too. So, the company had been on this like really upward trajectory for some time, and then it went from being worth $9 billion to literally being worth $0 in 1 year. In 1 year. Can you imagine your company going from a $9 billion valuation to zero and just being closed in 1 year? So that is why, I thought it would make a really fun case study. Like, obviously, I am a huge believer in law of attraction. Obviously, you guys have seen some of my videos. Um, I am a big believer in law of attraction, and I really think that you bring to yourself that which you want to experience in the world, as long as you put the right mental energy onto it. So I kind of split this up into two categories, and obviously sorry, I'm saying obviously a lot. I'm just realizing that, but I have split this up into two categories. I am splitting this up today in this case study into uh, things that she did right, because for the first few years of this company, she seemed to be on fire. I mean, like, people were so reverential to her, and they thought that this was a brand new genius, that she was going to disrupt an entire industry. Her company obviously, got to the point where it was worth $9 billion. So she was doing really, really well. So I want to go over the things she was doing right, law of attraction wise. And then obviously, once again, I said obviously. And then at the end, the company failed. And so there were some things that she must have done wrong, law of attraction wise, to get to that point. So let's start with the things that she did right. So, things with this company started off really, really well. In fact, she kind of came out of the gate running. Like, she, dropped out of Stanford and started the company, and almost immediately, like, some of her professors, like the chair of the sciences department at Stanford, left his tenured position to join her at Theranos. I mean, to be like talked into that by a 19-year-old is pretty crazy. So the first thing I think that Elizabeth Holmes did right was she came up with an amazing concept for a business and for an invention. This idea, this Edison box, would have been a total game changer, right? When people hear about this idea, it's really easy to get excited. And one of her thoughts behind it was like, most people who do get blood work, maybe you get blood work once a year, maybe twice a year. So you're kind of seeing some incremental changes over time, but you're not really seeing the regular picture. And the thought was, with these Edison machines, that she would be able to test blood for so cheap and with such a tiny little bit of blood. They would only be taking like this little tiny capsule of blood from you, that it would almost be more like watching a movie. Rather than seeing these like incremental pictures, it'd be like watching a movie. So you'd be seeing the changes in your body in real time. And that was a really exciting concept for people. So the number one thing she did right, law of attraction wise, was she had a brilliant concept, and it would have been a game changer. And the number two thing that she did right was she really at first had this single-minded point of focus. So her entire goal, at least at first, was to get this machine up and running. And so, of course, she knew what she had to do. She brought in really great experts. She brought in some brilliant minds to help her with this. And she knew that if she just kept focusing on the technology, on the device, that eventually she would have a prototype that would work. And she says a lot in the documentary, like she alludes to Thomas Edison. I mean, Thomas Edison failed making a light bulb 10,000 times before he finally succeeded. And so she knew that she might have to do 10,000 different tries of this machine before she got one that worked. And she put all of her mental focus on getting this machine up and running. And that is a great thing to do, law of attraction wise. So I think that's another reason why her company was really going uphill at the start. The third thing she did that was a really great thing, law of attraction wise, was that she just exuded confidence. But moreover than that, she also really inspired confidence in all of the people around her in her company. So, whenever she was interviewed, one thing that every interviewer said about Elizabeth Holmes was that she never blinked. She just had this really intense sort of stare, and she would never take her eyes off of you. It was this really sort of intense confidence that she had around herself, and it made other people really confident as well. But then another thing that was really brought up a lot during the movie, during the documentary, is that, it was really easy along the way for people in her company to want to leave or to quit because, the machine wasn't working for quite some time. And so, when they were thinking about leaving, they would go into Elizabeth's office to talk to her about it. And within 5 minutes of talking to her, they would feel like they were back on top of the world and that they could really accomplish this goal. So she was really great at inspiring everyone around her into believing that this product could be reality. So I think that's another reason why her company was going up. It was doing really well. I think the fourth thing she did that was really great, law of attraction wise, was that she was willing to take a humongous risk. I mean, obviously, she was a Stanford University student, which it's not easy to get into Stanford. It has like a 10% acceptance rate. And even then, those 10% that get in are brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people with absolute top test scores. So she knew that if she was going to make Theranos a success and make this Edison box a success, that she was going to have to quit school and just put all of her energy into creating this product. And I know from my history that I'm the same way. Whenever I want to accomplish a new goal, I kind of need to end the chapter that started beforehand, and I need to jump completely into my new chapter. So I think her willingness to take that big risk, to leave school and to start this company, was a really good thing, law of attraction wise. The number 5 thing that she did that was amazing was she was an avid self-promoter. She surrounded herself with really, really influential people. She was really cozy with the Obama administration, and she, would go to all of these great parties, and she would have all of these most brilliant and influential minds around her. And, she just really kind of got people to believe that she was the next Steve Jobs, that she was this genius creator who was going to completely disrupt the entire system. So say what you will about self-promotion. It can be kind of annoying to watch other people self-promote, but she was an expert at it. And I think in this case, it made her company do really, really well. Number 6, she surrounded herself with people who understood her vision and wanted to help this vision succeed. And this is something she did really early on. Like, she had brought in some of the professors from Stanford. She brought in some real experts in laboratory technology. And she said, if I'm going to make this work, I'm going to surround myself with people who essentially are yes people. And that eventually kind of turned into a bad thing a little bit later on, when she just couldn't hear no every so often. But I think when you're first getting started in a new venture, I think having people who surround you who are going to be good sources of support and who want you to succeed are really, really important. It's a really important thing. And lastly, she had this intense willingness to work toward her goals. She worked day and night. I mean, maybe was getting 4 hours of sleep every night while Theranos was in operation. And in a way that kind of struck me as being slightly uphill or upstream in terms of thinking, but it showed that she was really willing to put in the effort to get this company off the ground and to make her dream a reality. So those are the 7 things that I think Elizabeth Holmes did really, really well. And I think that's part of the reason her company was doing really, really well for some amount of time. But then what happened was, I think that things kind of switched in her mind. The idea with law of attraction is whatever we put our mental energy on, especially if we do it with emotion, is what we're going to draw uh, into our vortex, into our being, if you will. So there are 5 things that I kind of pinpointed from the documentary that I think that she started doing wrong, law of attraction wise, and I think that ended up being the undoing of her company. And number 1 was, I think she started offering conflicting vibrations. So one thing is, especially if you read or listen to Abraham Hicks materials, one thing that they make very clear is that you can't offer conflicting vibrations if you want to manifest. Like, you can't, for instance, say, I want to make a lot of money, and then at the same time offer a vibration of, but I don't believe I'm worth that money, right? If you want lots of money, but you don't believe you're worth that much money, then those are really conflicting vibrations, and you're really not going to go anywhere. So I think what started happening was she started realizing that there were just innate problems with her Edison machines, and that, certainly, even if they could eventually get them to work, it was going to take a lot longer than she expected. And she really rushed into it really, really fast. And she knew that. And so I think that in her head, she started offering these kind of competing, conflicting vibrations. On one hand, she still really wanted to make the whole thing a success, and she wanted to disrupt the system. But I think at some point she kind of knew deep down that there was trouble a brewing, and that it just wasn't going to be as easy as she thought it was going to be. And so at that point, certainly law of attraction is going to kind of screech to a halt, if you will. And the second thing she did, I think, that really took her company on the downhill slope was that she actually potentially hurt people. And I think this was a key one. So what happened was, while the machine was still in development and it was still not really working, and it certainly wasn't doing all of the things that it should have been doing, she had signed a contract, I believe it was with Walgreens, the idea was that she would start putting these machines into their clinics at their store. And so she had started, I believe it was in Arizona, and it became very clear fairly early on that the machines just weren't working. So they were actually taking blood from people in these Walgreens stores and then sending them actually back to their headquarters and having them tested on like traditional lab machines like, Quest or one of the big companies would have had. So the machines didn't work, and even when they were kind of working, they were only really working about 10% of the time. And she was aware of it. She was aware that the machines were not doing what they needed to be doing safely. And that was putting patients at risk, because patients were actually starting to get some of the diagnostics back from these machines, and oftentimes the actual results were flat out wrong. So she really potentially hurt a lot of people. And I think if you are creating a new product, that's awesome. Or if you're creating a new creative endeavor in your life, that's awesome. But if you're willingly, if you're willing to hurt people as part of the process, I don't think law of attraction is going to work for you, because at that point, you're not working from a place of unconditional love. If you want to manifest, you have to manifest from a place of unconditional love. It's just mandatory. The third thing she did that I think where she went wrong law of attraction wise is she went upstream. And I'm looking at what I wrote here. Upstream thinking. I think this had a lot to do with the regulatory backlash. So, unlike Steve Jobs and Apple, where, he was creating this technology and getting it out to the public, the one big difference between her technology and Apple's technology was that Theranos' technology had to be approved by the FDA. There were all sorts of regulators that were going to have to come in and approve this device and approve everything. And she knew that, and she knew that the machine wasn't working, and she knew that the system wasn't working just yet. And so in order to kind of keep the regulators at bay, she really went upstream. I think this is one of the major issues she had. She started really taking her mental focus away from the actual machine and getting that to work, to surrounding herself with really powerful people who could kind of shield her from the regulatory agencies. And so, while when she started, her entire focus was just this Edison machine and getting it to work and getting blood results, that were going to be good and good for people. But after a while, she took her focus, I think, almost entirely off the machine itself and put it into just saving the company and getting money for the company and keeping the regulators at bay. And once she took her mind off the machine, she went really upstream with her thinking. And I think once you go upstream with your thinking, it's a hard battle to win. It's really hard to get to where you want to go if you are paddling upstream. And she started doing just that. The fourth thing she did that I think was kind of wrong, eventually along the way, and this was covered in the documentary, there were people who worked for her who were real experts in their field. And they would just really go in and tell her very honestly that what she was wanting to do in a few different ways was just not feasible. It was just literally, by the laws of physics and the laws of thermodynamics, these machines could not miniaturize every last little procedure that could be done in a real lab. Like, she actually wanted these machines to be able to test for 250 different things. And, the people who were developing the product behind the scenes in the labs, they knew that there was no way to get all 250 of these tests into this one machine, just especially based on the size. She wanted it to be kind of a very portable size, about the size of a printer, of a large printer. So, these guys would come into meetings with her and they would say, listen, can't we just change the size of the machine to make it at least a little bigger, and that will give us more of an opportunity to get everything in there that we need? And she just would refuse to hear what experts said. Now, you may think that, positive thinking is great. With law of attraction, positive thinking is amazing. But you still sometimes have to realize that if you're surrounding yourself with experts, that it is wise to listen to people with lots of experience. And, certainly you don't want to put all of your attention in listening to naysayers, but if someone came up to you and said, the laws of physics defy this machine, at least in the size that you want it to be, then at some point you'd have to listen to them. You'd have to say, okay, well, what can we do to make this machine work? Maybe we can make the machine a little bit bigger. Maybe we can simplify it. Maybe instead of doing 250 different tests, maybe we could just do 30 or 40 or 50 tests, so there's less stuff going on in the machine. But she was unwilling to budge or compromise one little bit. And I think that lack of compromising really did her in, law of attraction wise, because if you're not willing to face any facts at all, you're not going to get anywhere. And lastly, this was one I just kind of added last minute, but it was also kind of covered in the documentary. And the last thing she did was she started demonizing the competition. So obviously, one thing that she was really concerned about, and you have to be concerned about with starting a new company, is you want to protect your trade secrets, right? You want to make sure that you're able to develop this technology and get it along before the competitors jump on board with it, right? And so there were a lot of times, and they showed several meetings and several parties that Theranos hosted, where basically they would get up on a stage in front of, the whole staff of Theranos and go, fuck you, Quest, Quest being one of the big lab companies. And I think that once you start demonizing people and you start looking for the bad, then the law of attraction, once again, is going to stop working for you. You know, even when you have competition in any market, you have to just believe that there is going to be enough business for all of you. And you have to understand that there will always be haters, and haters are always gonna hate. That is what haters do. Haters are gonna hate. So rather than focusing your attention on them and telling them to fuck off, you just got to keep doing what you're doing. But they made it a really big issue to go out and demonize their competitors. And they did it very, very vocally. So that's really it. You know, I think that what had happened with Elizabeth Holmes is that she started off really, really well, law of attraction wise. She had this great idea. She was willing to do the work. She took some major risks. She surrounded herself with really good people. You know, all of these things were great. She had this really intense, single-pointed focus of context. She really just wanted this machine to work. And I think when all of that was going on at first, it was all uphill. It was all uphill. But once her mind changed, and once she got defensive, and once she took her mind off of the product, and once she decided that she had to surround herself with all of these people to avoid the regulators, and once she started offering up these conflicting vibrations in her own mind, at that point, the company was not going to survive. And that is why ultimately this $9 billion value company went to zero, and her personal net worth went from over $1 billion to $0, like almost overnight. So it just shows you how powerful the law of attraction can be. And I would say, God forbid, if she ever tries to get back into business ever again, that she would actually be really benefited by studying, law of attraction and really focusing on what worked for her. Because there was a lot that worked for her for some amount of time up until it all went bad. So that's my case study for today. I just kind of thought it would be a fun thing to try to do. Anyway, thank you for watching my channel. If you want to hit the like button, the subscribe button, that's always awesome. And please leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking, and let me know what sorts of videos you want me to make in the future. Well, anyway, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day, you guys. Namaste.